I am really fired up for today's episode because I've brought in the best of the best, someone who's going to guide you toward a happier life using the exact steps and research that will boost your happiness day to day. Dr. Laurie Santos is in our Boston studios. She is a cognitive scientist and professor at Yale who teaches the single most popular course that has been taught at Yale in 300 years. It's a course she created called The Psychology of a Good Life. It's so popular that 1,200 students signed up within 3 days of it being announced. Now, Dr. Santos has spent her entire career researching what truly makes you happy. And she has one of the most popular podcasts on the topic. It's called The Happiness Lab. And I love her research. I have used it. I've cited it. I've written about it. I've even taught it in online courses that I teach and in the work that I do with some of the world's leading global brands. That's how powerful her work is. And you're going to feel that power today. And that's why you can hear your friend Mel just bubbling over. That's why I can't wait for you and for the people that you love and for me to learn absolutely everything that she has to share with us today. So please help me welcome Dr. Laurie Santos to the Mel Robbins podcast.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Oh, I'm thrilled that we've got you here in our studios.
And I'm like just looking around the studio being like, this is Mel's studio. So cool.
And you're in it.
I'm in it right now.
Well, you're so busy. So thank you for taking the time to be with us. And we're going to cover a lot. And I just want to tell you, as you're listening and you've invited Dr. Santos and I in the car with you or on your walk with you, that there is so much that she's going to unpack for you about happiness, from the things that we get wrong about it to the ways our brains are working against us to, most importantly, I don't know how you're going to do this, woman, but you're going to condense the most popular course literally ever taught on happiness into this conversation with key takeaways. And I understand you also have homework for us.
Yeah, sorry. You can't invite the professor on the show and not have your listeners get homework. Sorry, listeners. I didn't mean it.
That's okay. I would love for you to speak directly to the person that is with us right now and listening and share with them what they might experience that could be different about their life if they take everything that you're about to share to heart and they apply it.
Well, this is something we've seen in our students, which is that if you listen to what I'm about to say, if you follow the homework, you can actually become happier, somewhere between 5 to 15% happier, 5 to 15% more positive emotions, 5 to 15% more satisfied with your life. That's actually what the science tells you. And in our short version of the course today, that's what you're going to get.
Wow. What does 5 to 15% feel like?
Well, I think it feels like, if you were a 6 out of 10 on positive emotion, if I said all things considered, how satisfied are you with your life? You're like 5 out of 10. You go up to almost 7 out of 10. And that matters. Wherever you're feeling right now on how happy you are with your life, how much joy, how much laughter you have, you can kind of pop up a little bit. You're not going to go from 0 to 100, but these are lasting effects where you really go up a small but significant amount in terms of how you feel.
Can I share something?
Please.
So when you said 5 to 15%, my brain was like, well, that's not enough. And I think that's probably relevant to our conversation about happiness. I mean, does that surprise you that I was like 5%? Meh.
Not at all. I mean, I think when we talk about these strategies, especially to my very type A Yale students, right? Everyone wants to go from 0 to 100, right? Everyone wants to do the extreme thing. And I think one of the lessons we get from the happiness research is that this works better in baby steps. And it's not the kind of thing that you're just going to do one thing and happiness lasts forever. I think one of the disappointing things about happiness is that it takes constant work, like all good things in life, right? If you want to learn to play the violin, if I want to learn French, if I want to get really good at Guitar Hero, which is the last thing I've invested myself in. I'm just trying to move from medium to hard on Guitar Hero. I know it's a little 2005, but that's what I do. But you can't just practice once and then that's it. You got to kind of keep up with it. And one of the lessons that we get from the science about happiness is that happiness works the same way. It's kind of like a leaky tire. You do these different behaviors, you change your mindset, it fills things up for a little bit, but then you kind of got to do it again and again. It sort of takes constant work. But the good news is that you can change things around a lot.
So if you feel like your life is a leaky tire right now.
Yes. And I think probably listeners out there, my guess is a lot of you are feeling that way.
Yeah, I think so. I would love to have you share a little bit about this course that you teach at Yale University. It is the single most popular course taught in over 300 years. It's called The Psychology of a Good Life. Can you tell us a little bit about this course, why you created it, and why the heck is this so popular?
Yeah. So the course kind of started when I took on a new role on Yale's campus. I've been teaching there for over 2 decades, but in just the last couple years, I took on a role of what's called the head of college on campus. And so Yale's one of these weird schools like Hogwarts and Harry Potter, where there's like Gryffindor, Slytherin. There's like these like weird colleges within a college. They're basically like dorm communities. And so I became a head of college of one of these, which meant as a faculty member, I was living on campus with students.
Really? And you're married. So were
I'm
you
married,
there
yes.
with
So me and
your
my
spouse?
husband eating in the dining hall, hanging out in the coffee shop.
That's kind of fun.
I became this like benevolent aunt to like 500, 19-year-olds, right? But I thought this was going to be fun, right? I thought college life right now was going to look like what college life looked like back when I went there in
Right.
the 90s. And it just didn't. I mean, I was really looking at this college student mental health crisis up close and personal. And this is true at Yale, but it's just true nationally. So right now, nationally, more than 40% of college students report being too depressed to function. Right now, nationally, more than 60% of college students report feeling very lonely and overwhelmingly anxious. More than 1 in 10 has seriously considered suicide in the last 6 months. And this was what I was seeing like in my community, right, where there were just students who were really struggling. And I just kind of went through this crisis of confidence. Like as a professor, I'm like, we're not teaching them computer science and Shakespeare and all this stuff if like 60% of students are experiencing overwhelming anxiety most days. And I was like, we got to do something about this. And being a psychologist, I mean, I'm a trained psychologist. I said, well, my field has strategies, right? Like we know simple kinds of ways that you can change your behaviors and your mindset that, again, don't take you from 0 to 100, but work pretty well, right? Can make you kind of patch up that leaky happiness tire and feel a little bit better. And so I said, well, why don't I make a class? I'll just make a whole new class and I'll kind of teach students all these strategies. I wanted it to sound cool. That's why I called it Psychology in the Good Life. So it sort of popped out of the course. It sounded like kind of fun. But, it was a new class on campus. I thought, 30 or so students would show up. And so the first indication that I got that something was amiss was we get these little kind of tickers as students are registering for our class. It's like this little web page where you can kind of see this graph going up and down. And most of the graphs had an axis that was from 0 to 100, but mine started going from 0 to 1,000.
What were you like, where were you when that started happening?
It was like back and forth in my office because it was like happening over time gradually as students were coming in. And I think it was something different because students were sort of voting with their feet. I mean, if you're a 19-year-old right now, you don't like this culture of feeling overwhelmed and anxious and just kind of so many of your friends are just experiencing panic attacks. Like that is not a fun way to be. And I think the course was really offering students a solution and even an evidence-based solution. I was saying, look, I'm going to just comb through the science and tell you what does the science really say practically that you can do to kind of feel better right now.
And as you started to observe this about college students, did you see any correlation when you look around at your friends who are your age, my age, all ages as well, in terms of these statistics or just people generally being unhappy?
Yeah, well, this was the striking thing about the course, right? Is that, the course became viral on campus, but what I really didn't expect was for the course to get viral off campus. About a week into teaching the class, there was a New York Times article about the class, the point of which was basically like, all these 19-year-olds, an Ivy League school of their whole life ahead of them are miserable. What about the rest of us? It was kind of like, Dr. Santos, share these strategies with the rest of us. And I just got emails from all around the world of just people feeling like, it's not so much that I'm depressed. I just feel like I'm kind of languishing or just kind of meh. Or like, just there's so much going on in the world to feel stressed out about right now. Like everybody's kind of going through it right now.
I'm glad that you said that because I think that this conversation is going to be incredibly helpful for understanding not only what the teenagers and 20-somethings and early 30-somethings are facing right now, but also what we're all facing.
Yeah.
And so whether you're already starting to think about the person in your life who's in their 20s or in college or high school that you're going to share this conversation with, or you're thinking about yourself, like all of the takeaways from the research and the science and the studies that you've been doing are relevant to all of us.
That's right. And I think things are getting worse and will continue to get worse unless we come up with good strategies to deal with this, right?
What do you mean things are getting worse?
Well, you look at pretty much any statistic on mental health, and I'm not talking in college students now, I'm talking about in adults, especially in the US, things are just getting worse over time. Like rates of loneliness have nearly doubled, right, since we've been measuring these things. Like rates of depression and anxiety in the adult population are going up. And I think even if you just look at rates of things like people reporting that they're overwhelmed, burned out, right, you get, not just double digits, but very high double digits of folks saying like, yeah, that's me, I'm going through it. And honestly, if it's not you, it's your sister-in-law, it's your colleague at work. It's like we're just in a community where so many people just feel like they're not experiencing the kind of joy and positive emotion that they'd really like to be experiencing.
I love what you just said about joy and positive emotion, because I was about to ask you, well, if you're dealing with anxiety or depression or a lack of purpose, or you're feeling very lonely, is happiness the antidote? Is that why this matters so much for all of us?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it helps to dig in a little bit to what we mean by happiness, because we can mean so many things. And in fact, there was a funny study that showed that what lay people think about happiness is not what the scholars mean when they use the term happiness.
So you're the scholar, I'm the layperson.
Yes.
Okay.
So let me tell you what
lay down now.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what the scholars mean. So what the scholars mean by happiness is happiness in two forms. Scholars think about happiness in your life and happiness with your life. So what do we mean here?
Oh, hold on. So you just said you can be happy in your life, and you can also be happy with your life. I can think of a bazillion moments where I've been happy with what's going on, but not happy in it.
Yeah. I mean, the classic case, if you have kids, right, is that you have a newborn baby,
yeah.
right? And you're so happy with life. You've brought this new life and you have so much meaning and purpose. But in your life, there's dirty diapers, there's no sleep, there's,
Oh my God, I'm exhausted. My nipples are leaking.
Yes,
I'm not
exactly.
having sex anymore. I feel like I've just shot a cannonball through my legs. Like, what is happening? Miserable.
And you've had enough important people on here to know the opposite, right? Which is you can have a life in your life where there's all these hedonic pleasures. You're flying first class and eating at the best restaurants and the best wines. But with your life, you feel a little bit empty. Maybe you don't have a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning. And so what scholars are trying to do is they're trying to find strategies that boost both of these in your life. And specifically, we mean lots of positive emotions, lots of joy and laughter and contentment, right? These kind of subtle positive emotions. Although, as I guess we'll probably talk about, we don't want to get rid of negative emotions completely, right?
Yeah.
We want to have some negative emotions.
I just don't want them to run me over.
Yeah.
I don't want the negative emotions to feel like that's my whole life.
No steamroller from the frustration or the overwhelm and so on, right? And that's happy in your life. With your life, it's the answer to the question, all things considered, how satisfied do I feel? Do I feel like I have meaning? Do I feel like I have purpose, right? As nerdy professors, we use scales to measure these kinds of things. But you don't need a scale. You could probably answer right now, all things considered. How happy are you with your life?
And I take it, if you were to just stop and ask yourself, which you really should, am I happy in my life? Yes or no? And then ask yourself, am I happy with my life? That we're about to learn there are kind of different strategies that you can use to bring those numbers up in terms of that 5 to 15% satisfaction that's available to all of us.
Exactly. And one of the things that's striking is that a lot of the strategies move both at the same time. A lot of the strategies will give you a sense of positive emotion when you're practicing it, but also overall make you kind of just more satisfied in the long term too.
So your course, Psychology of a Good Life, has 26 lectures on happiness.
Yeah.
What do you think the big takeaway for your students has been?
Yeah. So one of the biggest ones is just how much we get happiness wrong, right?
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you're listening right now, you probably care about happiness, right? You probably want to feel happier. You're probably pursuing happiness, but you might not be feeling like it's going so great, right? You're kind of off somehow. And I think this is something that so many of us seem to go through, right? It's not so much that we're not seeking happiness out. We are. We're probably putting some effort into the choices we're making, the actions we're taking to feel happier. But we're kind of doing it wrong, right? And this is by and large what the science seems to be telling us. It's not that we're not going for improved well-being. We're putting a lot of work in. Some of us are putting a lot of money in, but we tend to be picking the things that don't get us there. And this is a big insight into happiness, is that we have theories about the sorts of things that make us happy, but a lot of research suggests those theories are just wrong. So we have these intuitions that are leading us astray.
I am so excited to learn from you. And I think probably the best place to start, you've talked about happiness with your life and happiness in your life, but what is the definition of happiness?
Yeah. Well, I think the definition of happiness is really boosting both of those, right? It's kind of finding the way to become happier in your life and with your life. That's kind of what we're going for when we're talking about improving happiness.
I love that definition. I do, because again, I'm going to reveal why I make myself miserable. It's because I immediately went like, oh, okay, so this is something I can do. I can literally like figure out how to be happy with my life, and I can figure out how to be happy in my life, and I can get my little checklist out, and then I can go. So it felt more like
it's doable. It's like a checklistable thing.
Yes,
yeah,
because I'm starting to really wonder, is it really more of a skill to learn how to be happy with and in your life?
I think it really is. I mean, as we talked about before, this idea of happiness as something that you need to build over time, right? It just kind of takes energy. It's like learning the violin or learning to play Guitar Hero, right? You kind of just build it over time. I think one of the problems is that we don't spend a lot of time learning ourselves, teaching our kids, setting up educational institutions to build these skills. I think understanding the strategies that we need to engage in to improve our lives, to regulate our emotions, right? To kind of not get run over by that frustration and overwhelm and so on. These are such important skills. I think a different misconception is we just assume some people are good at it and some people are bad at it.
That's not true?
It is true to a certain extent, right? I think some people are naturally better at it than others.
And is it because they're doing the things naturally that you're about to teach us?
It's because they're doing the things naturally. And some of these things come naturally. I will say I am not naturally a happy person. I've become happier, maybe even about 20 to 30% happier since I'm like really digging into some of these homeworks and doing these things. But those strategies absolutely don't come naturally to me. It's just the kind of thing you can learn over time.
Well, one of the things that you teach in your course is that we're not wired for happiness.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
One of the reasons we get it wrong is that we're kind of like set up not to be so happy, in fact. And I think this makes most sense if you think back to kind of evolution, right?
Okay.
Like we are just these survivors and reproducers that have to get out there on the savannah and not get eaten by a tiger or something, right? What makes you do that better? It doesn't really matter if you're experiencing a lot of positive emotion, joy, and so on, but you definitely want to experience like fear. You definitely want to experience anger so you can get access to maybe resources that you didn't get access to before. You're going to be driven to pay attention to the negative stuff, right? Because that's kind of what matters for, surviving and reproducing. And that means we have brains that are built with what's called this negativity bias. We kind of constantly notice the bad stuff out there. And that's because our brains are wired for it. These were brains that had to like notice the tiger that was hiding in the bush. So when it's scrolling through an Instagram feed, it's going to see the terrible stuff. And that's what's going to get us going.
Or if you walk into a cafeteria at a college or at work, you're going to notice that everybody already has a friend to sit with but you.
Yep. We notice all the bad comparisons that make us feel terrible, right? And so that's just another feature of this. And it makes sense evolutionarily that that's what we're built for, right? Like we don't necessarily survive and reproduce better if we notice all the things we're grateful for and the blessings and have contentment, right? It works better if we live this really volatile life.
Well,
right?
It kind of makes sense because if we were to like time travel back several thousand years and we're sitting out there on the savannah or wherever, if you and I are sitting there playing cards all day long, having fun, like cracking jokes, we're not going to eat.
Right. Or worse, whimagined the like contented Buddha, the perfect Zen happiness who's just meditating under a tree. Like he's going to starve and, get perfect.
Or get eaten while he's meditating. So it sounds like because our brains are wired to keep us alive, that mandate has kind of spiraled out of control in modern life. And especially when you think about things like social media or you think about just how much information is out there about what other people are doing, you're probably now defaulting to paying attention to that instead of just paying attention to what's right in front of your face in terms of how to be happy with and in your life.
Yeah. I think the modern world has found many more things for us to feel negative about and many more things to kind of activate our negativity bias.
So If you were to speak directly to the person that's with us right now listening, what is it that they probably have wrong about happiness, or the misconceptions that they have that are leaving them feeling unhappy? It's almost like when you understand this thing, it's actually going to help you when you realize that there's this thing you have wrong about happiness.
That's right. And I think it's worth being a little bit self-compassionate, right? If you're listening to this feeling like, oh, I'm maybe not flourishing, I'm maybe not experiencing as much positive emotion as I could. First of all, you are in the majority, right? You're not alone when you're dealing with this. Second, you're just allowing your brain to play out in the way your brain was built to play out. It makes sense that you're going through this, right? You're not doing anything wrong in some sense, but with a little tweaking of the way you engage in different actions and different mindsets, you can feel a lot better. Understanding where we go wrong, I think, is really the path to making things better.
Amazing. I mean, I'd rather stop doing things because it feels easier than have to start doing a whole lot of things. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, that is the bad news about happiness.
Uh-oh. Like, now I'm unhappy. I don't want to hear this. Okay, Dr. Santos, come on.
Look, all good things in life take a little bit of work.
Yes.
And happiness is like that too. But the good news is that if you put that work in, you can change. And I think that's another thing that we get wrong about happiness. We assume not just that some people are good at it and some people are bad, but that it's built in, right? If you're a kind of, Debbie Downer sort of person, or like a real optimist, you're just always going to be that way. We assume that there's nothing you can change about it. And study after study shows that you can change. Again, you don't necessarily go from 0 to 100, but with time, you can build habits in that allow you to make like important, significant progress.
That's great. Because I was just sitting there when you were talking about Debbie Downer, and I was thinking about my husband, Chris. Now, his name is
Chrissy Downer?
His name's Christopher Robbins, like from Winnie the Pooh. And so in a not so nice way, he's always kind of been the Eeyore of our family, just kind of, ooh. But it's because he's quiet. And I'm the Tigger bouncing all over the place. But I think he has probably had a higher level of happiness with and in his life. He's just not outwardly expressing it, whereas I'm all over the place.
One of the big things we get wrong when it comes to happiness is that we assume happiness is about our circumstances, right? We look out at people's lives and think, oh, well, if I could just be rich, I would be happy. Or if I could just get that promotion at work, from my college students, if I could just get the perfect grade or into the perfect internship.
Or be in the different friend group.
Be in a different friend group, different relationship. Be in a relationship if you're not, get in a different relationship, but buy that new house. Even I think just like buy that new thing, right? Whether that's the new dress or the new shoes. At a local level, I think we're buying things often to make ourselves happier. We think it's going to work, but really it doesn't work as well as we think. It seems like circumstances aren't the key to happiness that we expect. Now, that has a caveat. If you are listening to this right now and you're like in a refugee camp, or you don't have enough money to put food on your table, yes, changing your circumstances is going to matter really a lot for your material happiness going up. But my guess is you're listening to this and you're not necessarily in a refugee camp, that maybe you're not having the perfect finances, but you got food on the table and a roof over your head. If you're in that situation, then drastically changing your circumstances probably isn't going to affect your happiness in the way that you think. That's what study after study shows.
Well, and I think more empowering is to know that you don't have to change your circumstances.
That's right.
To boost your ability to feel happier.
And that's huge, right? Because changing your circumstances is a pain in the butt, right? Like going from, like your current salary to like $300 million a year, that's a big change. It's going to take a lot of work, right? Kind of finding a new relationship, getting a big promotion at work. These are hard things. And they're often things that most of us don't really have that much control over.
Yeah.
But all the strategies we're going to start talking about soon are ones that you have complete control over. They're just things that you can engage in yourself. What does the science really say practically that you can do to kind of feel better right now? You can actually become happier, somewhere between 5 to 15% happier. If I said, all things considered, how satisfied are you with your life? You're like 5 out of 10. Wherever you're feeling right now on how happy you are with your life, you can kind of pop up a little bit.